Before we formally begin, PLA would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Recognising we are meeting online today, I do want to extend that out to wherever it is that you are signing on from, recognising that we do have people from right across Australia today, and I believe a couple from across the ditch in New Zealand as well. So welcome to everybody today. For those that don't know, I'm assuming you do know who we are. That's why you're here today and part of one of our webinars, but Parks and Leisure Australia VicTAS. My name's Dan Ferguson. I'm the Executive Officer of PLA VicTAS. And PLA were formed in 1926, so fast approaching our 100-year anniversary. And we are the peak body for the people behind the places. So that's all of you that are in the room here today, everybody that works in and around the sport, recreation, leisure and parks industry. So our core functions are around training, professional development, networking, research and advocacy. And our vision is for Australia to be the most livable country in the world, renowned for its parks, sport and recreation facilities that provide the foundation for healthy communities and livable towns and cities. Now, as I said, a core component of what we do is professional development and networking, which today is one of those key opportunities for our sector. So getting on to today's session formally, again, fields of play, the costs associated with designing and building a field of play, and with being able to undertake today's session with our partners SPORTENG, who are providing their technical expertise as part of this upskilling for our members. So I want to thank them first and foremost. So today's session, we will be delving into the world of sports engineering, and within that world, there are two, fundamental processes that come through: designing and building. And while they might seem intertwined, they do each play a distinct role in creating the different facilities and services and experiences that we provide to our communities. So today's webinar, we're going to be exploring the costs associated with designing and building a field of play. And our experts from SPORTENG are going to be covering some of the key cost components in particular that might be required, what market trends currently are, and I've seen a little bit of a behind the scenes, and there's some nice interactive things that will be undertaken. In terms of today's format, again, a little quick welcome from me now. I'll get that over and done with quickly because you're not here to listen to me. We will tick it over to presentations from our team at SPORTENG. Be about a half an hour or so presentation, 30 to 40 minutes, which allows us time at the back end there for some Q&A, and they'll be facilitated. So again, a reminder, if any questions pop up, feel free to pop them in the chat function. We'll pick them up as part of the Q&A at the back end. With all of that done and dusted, you've heard enough from me, and this is where I do the nice handball to you, Lucas.
Hey, thanks, Dan, and good afternoon to everyone. I'll just bring the presentation up. And Dan, if you can give me the 5x5, all good to go. Excellent. Well, yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming along and attending this PLA webinar. We've been part of this program, I guess, over the last couple of years, and found these opportunities really good to be able to share some insights and our understanding and experiences from working across the country in planning, designing and building fields of play. Today, joining me with the presentation is Marty Cuthbert. Marty has just joined recently, coming across from City of Casey. Marty's going to be heading up our Queensland Brisbane team, who, based on yesterday's announcements and all the information that came out around the Olympics, it's really exciting to see some of that information and I guess the energy around what's planned for Brisbane. Andrew Morrow is also part of the team today. Andrew's also one of our civil engineers who runs the Melbourne design team, and Andrew has spent best part of 30 years working on the construction side, but in recent times has been working on the design and planning. I would also like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we all meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Dan gave us a little bit of a plug at the start, but a little bit more about SPORTENG, and I guess we're a specialist consultancy in the world of sports engineering, focusing on planning, design, construction, and the ongoing maintenance of field of play of all sports. We're a team of approximately 38 people across the country with significant experience in all aspects of field of play projects. We are a multidisciplinary team, so within the building we are able to access a range of qualified and certified practitioners, both civil engineers, agronomists, irrigation designers, asset and project management practitioners. These skills and this combination allows us to work on a wide variety of projects. So everything from the current design of the new Mac Point Stadium down in Tasmania to your local oval at Chadwick Reserve in the city of Kingston, and everything in between. We cover all the various sports listed here, and there's also, given the world of recreation, there's new and emerging sports and modified versions of these sports that are coming into play, which we're able to adapt and apply our skills to. We cover off on all the various sporting surfaces, your natural turfs, hybrids, synthetics, acrylics, and the red porous. Our capabilities, I guess, extend across the full life cycle of field of play, plan, design, and construction, so including site investigations, condition assessments, feasibility studies, detailed design and documentation, tender evaluation, construction phase, quality assurance, superintendency, irrigation design and auditing, and master planning, to name a few. So what is today all about? As the title of the webinar, field of play costs, we want to dive into the detail around that, and I guess provide some insights and understanding around where we believe are the key points and aspects to understand and apply to your projects in all different facets. Today we'll look at where does the money go in terms of where can costs be associated and spent throughout. We'll look at a few different scenarios. So if cost isn't understood, what may happen and what's the impact to your project. And then we've got a case study. So we'll be designing and scoping and doing a cost estimation live for PLA Reserve, which is a really exciting brand new project that's come onto the SPORTENG books. From there, we'll wrap up with a few key takeaways, and then, as Dan said, we'll get into some Q&A. So definitely, please use the chat function to put your questions, comments. We understand that there'll be plenty of questions and maybe items for clarification, and we'll do our best to circle back. If we don't get them today, we'll definitely catch up with you after the event. So let's jump into it. Where does the money go? I guess the cost, as we all know, this is really just about setting the scene. The cost is involved in all the different stages of a project's life cycle. So whether it be in the planning, the initial planning and feasibility stages, design and procurement stages, construction, obviously a big ticket one, and something that's, I guess very, very much comes to mind when we think about cost. And then there's also the maintenance and operations. And I guess the key message here is that the cost, there are costs to be borne in all of these stages, but also the impact of having a great level of understanding of the site or the requirements or the methodology is also going to impact on the cost of the project. And I guess the other aspect of this is that where cost will impact outcome, and in most cases we are all trying to provide sports fields and fields of play to support recreation of some shape or form, and even to a broader extent, community participation, community access, and environmental benefits. So it's really important for us to always keep an eye on both aspects and understand that while the cost of a project may be, the budget may be decreasing or increasing, there's going to be a tangible impact on the outcomes and performance of those assets. So to have a quick look into all of these stages, I'll throw to Marty to talk quickly about planning and feasibility.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lucas. And yeah, certainly coming from council experience, I'm really cognizant of all of the costs around the council side. So hopefully I'm able to bring a little bit of that perspective to this discussion. I think when we think about cost of sport field and sport infrastructure, often we're just talking about the funding that we're going to put into the capital program for the delivery of a sports field project, be that a new or an upgraded facility. So I think what is probably really opportune to capture is the costs involved at the front end and in the back end of maintenance of your asset or facility. So some of the costs and the challenges you might encounter at that planning and feasibility stage is really just about understanding what the true cost of that planning phase is. So, it's something that you're scoping internally as a project. So if you're doing that, are you basing it on real and current market costs for the design and delivery of that project, or are you just pulling a number based on previous year's capital programs? That's really important. The second aspect to really think about there is around your service levels. So, your clubs probably have an expectation that you'll be delivering the MCG to their community facility, but really helping them to understand what service level you deliver for other facilities, and also what is the true cost of that level of service to maintain post delivery of the project, to really set the expectation and for that to be really clear with all your stakeholders from the get-go. I think from a consultation point of view, that internal and external, like I said, with the clubs, also internally, you've got a maintenance team or maintenance contractors who are out there every day with fields that you've built or inherited in the past. So really capturing that experience, learning what is working and not working for your location in terms of the climate, in terms of the soil, all of those different things, capturing those learnings and bringing them into the front end of scoping a project can really help to capture some of your costs, right at the start. And then just around the stakeholder consultation and approval. So often we're thinking just about the financial year in terms of the delivery of the capital works program, and July 1 is the first day on earth and the 30th of June is the last day on earth, and everything needs to happen between those periods. But really thinking about, particularly for field of play projects, the timing of those projects and how you can optimize that around obviously the user needs, so between football and a cricket season, but also in terms of the best time of year for putting the turf down and how you can really make the most of that. All of those sorts of things may take a little bit of time and cost to get right, and may need some external advice from companies like SPORTENG. But really that amount of time and investment in the front end can truly save cost, time, reputation, all of those things further down the track.
Thanks, Marty. Nice wrap up there of all of those aspects. Andrew, I'll throw to you to talk about similarly the design and procurement aspects. You're on mute, Andrew.
Sorry guys, that's maybe my IT skills at its full lack of. Good afternoon to all. In terms of design and procurement, I suppose design for the sports industry is a specialist area. So quite often, not to get the right team or design team can lead you with different costs or blowouts down the track. Once you get through the construction, or even end up building something that actually isn't fit for purpose and isn't realised until you're actually using the facility. So engaging a specialist is, obviously we're a specialist, so we would say that, but I come from a construction background. I've built everyone's designs and have my opinion on everyone's quality of designs, and when I've been asked to build something that hasn't been designed by a specialist, the results can be quite disastrous down the end. And effectively, I mean, that's what you as the client, you're not specialists in this area, so you really want someone to stand beside you and know that you've got the trust and the confidence in what's going to be produced at the end. The other part that certainly having a designer that's specialist in this industry is aware of the contractors that build in this space, and I think that's an important part that a design team can offer as well to a client as to who should they go out to procure the project. I know there's governance around procurement guidelines and so forth, but at the end of the day, to take the quality from the start of a well-planned job to a well-designed, if you don't get a good contractor that knows what they're doing, you still end up with not the result that you wanted to set out to. And that all has fairly significant cost implications because what we design, if we're not aware of the current market and how buildable our design is, we can inherently come out with a design that a construction company will look at and will have to put significant extra cost in, thinking that that's what was required because that's what's shown on the plan, and that could be they could be led down the wrong path. So yeah, in general, design's critical one for quality to make sure that what is going to be built meets the expectation of the stakeholders and the clients, but also knowing how things are built can certainly have a big impact on the cost, overall cost.
Good segue into the next section there, Andrew, and I guess where probably the majority of the cost is borne in most of our projects is the construction phase. So a couple of comments around this stage of the life cycle.
Yeah, I suppose this is where I kind of got into sports construction many years ago, and I've seen a variety of cost results come out of it. So a well-designed project will end up producing a contractor that fully understands what the intent is, and with the right conditions to build in, should be able to deliver on the tendered price. I mean, the fear that we all have, especially from a client's perspective, cost blowouts like anything. It's money that we have to make sure that we're spending wisely, and it's not our money. So in construction, working with contractors that work in this space, that you're never going to pick up everything. There'll be unknowns that you'll potentially come across through the earthworks phase, but working with a contractor that can help the client work through those on site and be mindful of the costs. But if they've got a good understanding of where they're going, they can certainly minimise any variations that may pop their head up in that regards. But there's those different areas of the cost from earthworks, different costs obviously as you start building natural to synthetic, and infrastructure costs across both types of fields. They all have different options. So having a design through the design process, go through those options, or even putting up options that a contractor can price as different options, certainly will help mitigate any cost blowout down the track.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And I'll round this out with a couple of comments around the maintenance and operational costs. And I think Marty made a really good point in her comments around the planning and feasibility, because I think that it's critical to understand in terms of the service level and I guess the end user conditions and what's required in terms of the sport and sports to be played, and the levels and the different requirements that those sports and levels and user groups may have, and then how that impacts back to the provision of maintenance, and in many cases, especially where there's an upgrade of a field, so going from your local level to a regional level, while the focus can typically be around the construction, the capital cost, improving the drainage, improving irrigation, maybe increasing the size of the field. There's a direct relationship also then with the increase and the provision of maintenance, which is going to allow that field to perform as per the design. And so I think that in many cases, in most cases, it's something that's really needs to be well understood, and without understanding it, there can be significant risks to your project once it gets into an operational phase, and the users start to come in and start to play their various seasons, especially if it's a multi field sport situation. The maintenance provision in terms of the intensity, the type of maintenance, the time allocated, and the way it's maintained is going to have a direct impact on the user's experience, and therefore, I guess the perception around, has that money been well invested, or are there aspects which are missing or have been underfunded or left out, which are now impacting on the use of the field, which I guess sort of segues into our next section, which I guess understanding that there is that relationship and the interaction of cost to outcome and quality. It also has a significant relationship to the risks that are involved across our projects. And so there's I guess this section really highlights a series of situations which you may have come across. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but it's definitely a few of the situations, circumstances that we wanted to, I guess, share today, and just prompt, I guess, some discussion, B, some thinking about the flow-on effect of what can happen if certain aspects, certain levels of understanding of the detail is not available within our projects. And so I'm not going to go through this for word by word, but we will share this presentation through Dan and the PLA afterwards. However, I wanted to call out the third item on this page, which is one of those, I guess, site investigation, the planning and feasibility stage, and around the geotechnical side of things, because that's probably where we see the most significant risk in most projects, whether that be natural turf or synthetic or hard courts, because it really, I guess, having that sound base and the ability, as Andrew mentioned, the contractors having the confidence and understanding and being able to build off the subgrade or off the base, and do that do that in an effective, cost-effective way, but also in a way that's going to allow that pavement, that surface, to hold its integrity for the expected or design life, which may be up to 20-25 years for a natural field, or longer, and for synthetics, from a 10 to 15 to 20 year design life. So understanding and I guess conversely, not understanding the soil conditions can have a significant cost implication to your project. It can also then have an impact to the service delivery, which is then going to have a connection to reputational risk. And so I guess the key takeaway here is that it's all interconnected in terms of understand the level of detail and understanding and scoping, and being able to then minimize and lower the risk around cost, service delivery, and then reputation. The second page again provides a series of examples and situations to consider that may be applicable to your projects. And I guess I'd call out the first one here in terms of the active and passive recreational demand is not understood, and I guess that's a situation that we come up against in many projects, and it is a really tough aspect of planning and I guess the provision of recreational services, whether it's in a local government setting, in a school setting, or even at the as you go up into the regional and elites level settings. The challenges around how many players are we catering for, when are they playing, what sport, what are the minimum requirements in terms of the fields of play. One that constantly comes up at the elite level for cricket is run-up length, and I share that because it's always something that I guess surprises me and is a real talking point, because run-up length has extended, I guess, over the years in that sport. And when we talk about a run-up length needing to be 30 meters, obviously for every meter and every meter that the facility gets larger, the cost goes up. And so the management and I guess the non-technical, the non-sport stakeholders will be saying, well, hang on a minute, we've got to cut the cost. But then the players and the coaches are saying, well, our players need to, our players have got 30-meter run-ups, so we need to cater for that. I guess at the local community end, it's participation based on demographics and your profiles around which sports, and if they're multi-sport fields, how are they trending, and what's going to be going up and what's going to be going down, what are you promoting, and so they're really tricky discussions and requirements to come up with, and so we, I guess, need to do some homework and be able to define those as best we can, because for each of those requirements, it does impact the components and the design in terms of what do we need to cater for and how does it need to perform into the future. So, as we mentioned at the beginning, I guess a key part of today was our thinking around how do we make this useful, interactive, really get into the nuts and bolts of it, having, I guess, set the scene around what where cost is involved, how it's impacted by level of detail, understanding is it 5, is it 20, is it black, is it white. There's so many different impacts on cost, and so we would like to run through. We're going to run through a live demonstration, I guess, of scoping and cost estimation for this project. So PLA Reserve is our case study project. We've got a natural AFL cricket oval, and also existing at the moment is a natural soccer and AFL oval there in metropolitan Melbourne. That's home to both senior and junior community level cricket, AFL, soccer, and local and regional school sports. There's also passive recreation, general community use, and dog off leash. So that sets the scene in terms of the I guess our subject for today. I am going to now change my screen and jump into scoping mode. So for the case study today, Marty's going to play the role of client. Andrew and I will be SPORTENG, and we're going to work our way through what this might look like. So we're going to first off, as the client, we want to understand, what are your requirements, Marty, and what does these sporting facilities need to be? What are the current, I guess, if we can kick off with, what are the current limitations, from your perspective? What are the main issues and concerns and limitations really that have brought about this project needing to be initiated?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you identified, there's a lot of different users on the site. So not only there are a lot of community and junior club uses, but also a fair amount of community use. And you can definitely see even just condition-wise, the site on the right-hand side has a lot of wear and tear from a number of different activities and functions. So, you know, there's the main oval on the left-hand side, as you can see, it's pretty well maintained, got a good maintenance regime. There's some wear to the side in key areas, but we really want to optimize the surface so that it can be used year-round and it's functional. It is functional year-round. We want to be able to get more use out of the site on the right. So you can see there's a few different sports laid out, but really we want to be able to maximise that both as a sporting facility but also as public open space for the neighbouring residential areas.
Great. So you're definitely forecasting that the use is going up in a significant way for both fields. And in terms of, I guess, what's working well for this site, what do you like about the site and aspects that you'd like to retain or enhance?
Good question. So probably looking just to maintain the service to a competition level standard on the AFL and the sort of cricket side. The other side, it's a bit more of a multi-use. So at the moment, there aren't any tenant clubs, but it is used for informal, like running groups, personal training, more of like an informal field of play for, you know, cricket, soccer, kids kicking the footy. So I guess we want to retain that like multi-use functionality. And yeah, probably interested in what options there could be around a competition level site. For any sport, like we've got a real limitation of venues quite broadly across the area. So I guess more of like a feasibility around could that site or surface be fit any sort of competition sport?
And so for this multi-purpose, for this site here on the right, what sort of surface are you looking to scope up?
Interested in a professional opinion on that. We've got we've got actually a lot of interested soccer clubs in the area around us increasing the number of synthetic surfaces around our council, but I guess we probably don't have a lot of experience with synthetic surfaces and probably interested in what you can provide to us in terms of like a cost or you know, life cycle cost comparison for synthetic versus a natural turf.
And is that use going to be both, you know, weekday, weekend, day and night?
Yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah, it would be.
Great. All right. So I guess in terms of other aspects to consider on the site in terms of water, you know, for your natural turf, do you have a reliable water source? Do you know if your water quality is good for the maintenance of turf grass, or is it an issue?
Question, and I'm going to refer to our maintenance team on that one and get back to you, which is often something that your design and construction team won't do, but it's very good practice. So yeah, have to get back to you. But I mean, just looking at the aerial shot, I would hazard to say that we do have a pretty good drainage and water availability for the AFL, but yeah, there might be some work that's required if we were to consider natural turf on the multi-use.
Yep. And does council have a preferred turf grass species or cultivar that they're using across their ovals, or open to suggestion?
Open to suggestion, yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your requirements and council's requirements for the site, so that we can start to piece together some scope and cost estimations against all these elements?
Just the timing of when we'd be able to do the work. Just really conscious with the football and the AFL season. The cricket and the AFL season, like, yeah, they really want to minimise the amount of time that they're off the surface. We don't have a lot of other alternatives for them to use. So, yeah, I guess, how sort of quickly we can drop that in.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, definitely. Given both fields are going to be upgraded, there's going to need to be some level of staging plan and some decisions made around which field goes first, and then obviously some displacement arrangements, and then the bump back in terms of bringing clubs and use back in. But I guess from what we're hearing, both fields need to be upgraded. They need to have more capacity to accommodate the growing demand of sport. They've got some current limitations, and so yeah, I guess what we need to do now is really work through some of the detail, what needs to be involved, and roughly what it's going to cost you. So Andrew, we need to work through this scoping and costing exercise now to sort of respond to Marty's requirements. In terms of the first stage around site investigation and feasibility, what are we thinking in terms of what needs to happen in terms of that phase?
I think basically to understand if it is a full reconstruction and there's a significant amount of money that's going to be spent on it, then investigation and putting enough money into that investigation phase is going to be critical to get the right outcome that's going to last the distance. So you obviously need a feature leveling survey to tell us what the topography is. Geotech is most likely required on most projects. The bit that quite often is forgotten or not put into it because it does cost a bit of money is an environmental report. And especially on inner city councils or councils that are in older councils that have had a lot of areas that have been repurposed over their life, and the chance of having additional costs at the construction phase, which is what we don't want, because we haven't done enough investigation through the design phase to understand what the site was used for and the potential risk of contaminants in the soil. So that's something that I really, on big projects like this, I think needs to be certainly included. Obviously, as you've mentioned before, if you go a natural field, the quality of the water coming in for irrigation is critical. The chance also use this on other projects is to understand that if you've got existing fields and you're upgrading, there may be significant opportunities to reuse some of the existing root zone material that's already there. So we get, in this case, we're looking at maybe putting a synthetic on the soccer. There may be a layer of material there that can be reused or repurposed on the natural field or on another council site, even a landscaping project. So having an agronomy soil test is probably really beneficial as well. So, and then obviously before we get racing down the track into detailed design, getting a concept design out and some high level costs for the client to go back to the stakeholders and put that amongst everyone so that everyone can see where this project is heading in terms of cost. And what you're going to get for those costs at a very early stage saves a lot of money and a lot of rework down when you get into detailed design and further down the track. So ballpark, and I kind of won't break it into all those items, but it's somewhere around as a subtotal, somewhere around about $40,000 to $45,000 for both those fields. If you're surveying, geotech, environmental, getting someone to look at the water quality, doing some soil testing from an agronomy perspective and producing a concept plan with some high level cost estimates, that's where we start. And then once that's really been signed off by the client and gone back to the stakeholders and say, well, we had this great wish list at the start and we've put it all together on a plan and this is what it's going to look like in terms of cost, throw that around amongst the group. If it's not going to meet the budget based on current costs, then what are we going to de-scope it to? How are we going to, I hate the term value manage, we're literally going to take stuff out, and by taking items out, elements out, being aware of what the risk is to the project. It might be just an item, it might be we're not going to have lights, but you might need lights 5 years down the track. So how can we future-proof it so we're not having to have a massive cost rebuilding a or trenching across the surface. So once that's all been really thrashed around and a really good understanding of current costs, then the detailed design is about trying to design something that is going to be fit for purpose for what we want. We want a high use area on a synthetic. We want a high quality natural field that's going to take the level of sport that's going to be played on it. And that's the design principle, what we're trying to design to, but we've also got to produce a design that a contractor can actually build in a cost-effective way. We don't need to have cranes and other pieces of equipment to come in to finish off light poles because we didn't design access around the edges, if possible, to stage a project on how it would be typically built. So,
all right, Andrew, gonna need a ballpark figure for design.
Ballpark figure for that is for both fields is some for detailed designs around about $55,000 to $60,000.
All right, excellent.
The tender phase, we can certainly, a consultant can certainly help in that area. You're probably looking somewhere around $4,000 to engage a consultant to support you in the review of tenders. And when we get into the construction phase, having the support of a consultant that's well versed in construction, that understands the design process, a lot of councils will take up that option. So typically, it's somewhere around about $25,000 to $30,000 from start to finish on a project this big, because it'll vary, upwards of 8 to 12 months to deliver. So that's providing support to make sure that the inspection and test plans are signed off and the quality is delivered by the contractor through the process.
Okay, great. So that sort of sets us up with the design, planning and design. If we get into some high level ballpark construction costs for both the natural turf AFL and the synthetic soccer.
Based on those areas, we're looking about $210,000 for the natural field to do the bulk earthworks, and for the synthetic field, you're looking in terms of and what that does with the natural is also gives you the subgrade preparation, so we're ready to go to start building the irrigation and drainage system off that. A synthetic is about $340,000, and you'd be thinking, well, what's the difference? The difference is understanding between natural and synthetic, that if there was to be any movement, it's very expensive to go and fix up a synthetic field. You can top dress, you can do a lot more cost-effective maintenance on a natural field. So there is more in the remediation of the subgrade, the dirt underneath, to make sure you're producing a pavement that doesn't move within the design tolerances that we are designing to over a 20 to 25 period. You want to get 2 life cycles out of synthetic grass, out of a design and out of construction, without having to do any work, if possible, underneath. So there's the difference, or reasoning between the difference between the two. And if you're looking at in terms of stormwater, they're pretty well one's a bit smaller than the other, so it's about 130,000 for a natural field. For the synthetic field, being soccer, it's about 75,000. So now we've got the infrastructure underneath. There's obviously a bit more in the natural surface. You've got to put an irrigation system in, and if we include lighting as well as part of that, you're probably looking somewhere around about $500,000, about 520,000. On a soccer field, obviously there's no irrigation. We save a bit of money there on a synthetic, but lighting is still going to be around about $250,000. Then we get to the bit that everyone wants to see put down. We've actually got the sand, we've got the turf on the natural, we've got shock pads and synthetic grass on the synthetic. So you're around about the 700,000 for the root zone sand and the turf for a natural field. And the bit of the kicker that always floors the client is on the synthetic, you're around about 1,240,000 for the infrastructure to finish off a synthetic field. So that includes your concrete edging and so forth around it. Really, the only bits that are really missing is your fencing and your player shelters. So fencing on the AFL, obviously it's a bit bigger. It's about $245,000 for fencing, including ball netting behind the goals to keep the balls in. Shelters for both away and home teams and the technical box. And then if you're looking at for a synthetic field, you're just through due to size is about 165,000 in this case for that. And we typically use about 6% for construction and pre-ling. So most contractors they've got to get to site, they've got to set up site, they've got to set all their site sheets up. They've got to if they're a good contractor, they'll have a project manager and contract admin support through the project to make sure that the project runs smoothly. They've got adequate resources to manage the project. So that would, typically on these two projects based on those figures be somewhere around about there it is 108 and 124. So that really brings us to the grand sum down the bottom, Lucas.
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew. All right, so if we look at our costs outside of the construction, so we're at around about 130,000 there, taking in all of those items, and then we've got about 1.9 for the natural turf cricket field for that sand root zone with subsurface drainage and irrigation, fencing, ball netting, construction preliminaries, etc., which is a square metre rate, brings us up to around $166 per square metre for that particular profile. And that profile is going to give us, as Marty alluded to, they need to increase their capacity. That I guess is a level of investment, that is required to get to that level of performance. In terms of the synthetic soccer, which we're looking at, into the 50, 60 hours a week capacity. The total cost there comes to just over 2.1 million, which is just a tick over 270 per square metre. The other part to it is just around maintenance. So in terms of I guess doing some maintenance estimations for a community level field undertaking, natural turf with spring renovation, mowing, fertilizing, aeration program, herbicides, pest control, line marking, irrigation water obviously is a big consideration that in terms of the number, but is sometimes included, sometimes excluded, depending on how your organisation accounts for it. We're talking at around about $12 a square metre for maintenance of a natural turf, and then if we move over to the synthetic, a synthetic maintenance regime for a community level soccer field is going to be around 24,000 for the year, which is just over a tick over $3 a square metre. All right, so hopefully for for everyone there online, we've been able to provide some insights into the scoping and cost estimation approaches and some of the rates and I guess the rationale behind those. It is important, I guess, to understand that this is an example. There's some definite, I guess, detail that hasn't been undertaken, and in a specific project, we'd be diving a lot more into the detail to be able to define requirements and costs, etc. However, hopefully that gives you some indication around some of those key elements. I will stop sharing now, and I think it's probably about that time, Dan and Marty, that we can jump into some questions. So over to Marty and Dan to facilitate the Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Lucas. And being the PLA reserve and speaking on behalf of PLA, I'm just going to throw out there as well, we'd like a new pavilion thrown in there as well. So if you can just find that in the budget there somewhere, Marty, as the council contact, if you can find a budget, that'd be great.
Yeah.
What we're going to do, we are going to throw it over to questions. Please feel free, as I said, drop your comments or questions in the chat function, or you can raise your hand and ask the question directly with cameras off and microphones and whatnot. I'm going to just kick off with a bit of a leading question from my end and from PLA's end, and it actually kind of leads off of what Kathy Kiss has popped into the chat function there around costs for projects, and are we seeing an increase in cost of materials, and is that availability or other reasons? I was going to ask a general question around, I guess, the trends in costs over recent years, whether there has been any noticeable changes in costs, particularly increases. It is a piece of work that our PLA advisory team have been looking into, and there will be a presentation, a little plug for our upcoming conference in May. There will be a presentation on that from PLA Advisory, but just any thoughts in that space around trends in costs over the last few years?
But look at, I'll let Lucas do the natural, but if I look at synthetics, a lot of the products are oil-based and products, raw materials coming from overseas. So the cost of transport obviously through COVID and then post-COVID, containers have come back down, but they went up 3 times, 4 times the cost. So that really had an impact on that synthetic grass surface, shock pads, and so forth. Like anything, steel as well. So fencing has gone through the roof. Where has it gone? Is our gut feel over the last year? It's probably plateaued a little. Containers have come back down, not quite back down to pre-COVID levels, but still not as where they were 2 or 3 years ago. So that's probably stayed where it is. It hasn't kind of kept on that projection that it was for the last 3 years. In terms of crushed rock and natural and concrete and so forth, yes, there is increases, but they haven't been astronomical as we saw probably 2 or 3 years ago.
The other thing I'd add to that is, I guess, just making sure you're really quite refined with how you're preparing the cost estimates. And I think the challenge being, if you just sort of look at previous years' delivery programs and extrapolate out, often, that's not considering different site conditions that might be present for one site versus another. So that's probably where it may be less around like significant increases in the cost of materials, but more just around like accuracy of the cost estimate for that specific site and project.
Yeah, and for me, Dan, I guess our industries know, we're not sheltered away from, the macro economic challenges that the world is facing, and therefore there has been definitely some increases across the board. But I guess in terms of, our approach to that is trying to work as much as we can to really understand what is needed on a as needs basis versus a wants basis, and really try and narrow down, and then look at materials, and probably the big one for me is looking at location of materials. So where's your material coming from? And we spend a lot of time meeting with and talking to suppliers all around the country, and even abroad, to understand where are the products that we can specify or provide to a client that's going to be in their region, so that we're not paying for exorbitant travel costs, etc.
Awesome. And a little follow up to that one as well, separate from, I guess, materials. Has there been any noticeable changes around, I guess, construction costs, or what you are seeing being quoted out there and things like that in terms of availability of construction companies, etc.?
I think it's been the last, probably up to the last 6 months, there's been a lot of work out there. So the actual supply of work has meant, and with a limited number of contractors that have the expertise in this facility, they were all very busy. Thus, their ability to increase their price, knowing that there was plenty of projects to win, probably has pushed it up a little just in that regard. But with any construction, there's construction equipment and fuel's a massive cost if you're on a big project and you've got big equipment running around. So the price of oil and petrol, the way that's gone, has certainly had its effect on the cost of construction. I think my gut feeling moving into the next year is that, especially obviously in Victoria, and what Marty said before is that different states, different sites, and that will have these costs. But Victoria has certainly slowed down in the amount of projects, so I think it'll be more competitive. I think New South Wales there's enough projects in Queensland. Well, it's about to take off. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with pricing from that perspective.
Perfect, thank you. I might pick up one of the questions that's come through in the chat there, just around the natural turf area and synthetic turf area and the costing differences during that exercise. And there's a comment there that their experience is that synthetic field cost is significantly higher compared to natural turf. If there's any comments in and around that.
The capital costs, that's true. The maintenance costs, it's reverses. And what I think that clients need to understand and get across to their stakeholders is actually when we talk about playing hours, and there's limitations on natural to synthetics that different. It's a little bit more than that. It's actually how many feet that you put on it. So if you've got an AFL side and there's 36, 40 players, and we say it's 30 hours a week for a natural field, well, that's fine. But if you have a school event and 600 kids go and have soccer, mini junior football there and break it up into a whole heap of different sports, all of a sudden that 30 hours for should be counted as 60 hours. So when you work it out on a cost per hour per player basis, a synthetic grass over the life, whether a 10 or 20 year capital maintenance and replacement costs, will come out more cost effective as purely from a cost perspective. And there's a whole heap of other issues around environmental issues and so forth. But if you're just an accountant and you want to compare dollars with dollars, capital expense, yes, natural's cheaper, but over the life of the project, you'll find that synthetic is cheaper.
I think that's a really important point that you do make there in terms of that reminder to continue to consider life cycle costs throughout for these types of projects, and yeah, don't be put off by that upfront cost necessarily, regardless of approach taken, but being cognizant of that life cycle approach to projects. I'll pick up a question here from Richard Simon. G'day, Richard. Do sports field engineers prefer that the site investigations, such as geotech and soil testing, etc., are undertaken as part of the total design project, or can these be done prior and reports made available? And he asks that in the context of whether generic site investigations are less useful than investigations being commissioned after having been briefed on the detail about future usage of the field of play, etc. Any comments on that? Chicken or the egg approach?
I think, Richard, the critical question is not so much when the geotech is done, but to understand that the geotech has been given the brief. We're not designing a road. We're not designing a building, a pavilion. We're actually designing sports fields. And what is it? Is it a natural field or a synthetic? Because that is a different question that you put to a geotechnical engineer to get a different test and different results. So if the client is quite happy to understand what they think they're going to deliver, it's a natural field or a synthetic field, then for an engineer design engineer to come in and have that bit of information already done, then that's fine. Where it falls apart is if the recommendation from the geotech has not understood that we're trying to design a synthetic field with a really tight tolerance. I just thought you just want generic boreholes and a couple of CBR tests. That's not valuable for us, and we have to go out and redo it. So that's where the risk is if they haven't been given the correct brief to start with.
And I might add there, Dan, for Richard, is I guess having sort of spent time on both sides of the fence now, I guess I had more success gaining funding, for projects when I'd done more background and detail, and that was included in the business case. So there was a lot more, I guess, executive confidence in the cost estimate. Therefore, getting, I guess there's nothing worse than getting funding only to turn around, in in July, August, and come back to the exec and say, sorry, we now need another 400,000 because we hadn't allowed for this and that. That's a really tough conversation to have with council and the community. So I think doing your site due diligence early is I guess a way of de-risking the project and increasing the likelihood of attracting funding.
Just on that, like just thinking about the phasing with your, a design potentially in one capital year and construction in another, or a future where you do have more confidence in in some of those site conditions. I would also say that it's not just design and construct. There is also that step before where you can have a concept design, where you can do like those site investigations on a concept and a probable estimate of cost before you dive into the detailed design, consultation, and then construction. So I think just, maybe breaking up the project a little bit further.
Fantastic. Thank you, team. I'm going to pick up another question from the chat here, but I am noting we are a little bit over time. So I'm going to put a call out there. If there's any further questions, drop them in the chat, raise your hand. Now's the time to get your questions out there. But I'll pick up the one from Kaylee here in the chat. Within Victoria, particularly metro areas, are you seeing a trend in the type of grass being chosen to use?
I'll take that one. So I think in most cases, in 90% of cases, it's warm season couch grass, and I would still say that the majority of choices are still going with Santa Ana. However, we have seen a number of projects spread across the metro and regional areas using other cultivars, including Tiftuff. And we've also recently undertaken some trials with some Tahoma 31, Iron Cutter. So there are other cultivars that are being used throughout the region, but I would say at this point the majority would be Santa Ana, and probably Tiftuff is the other one that's starting to emerge. And I guess from a production perspective, we know that the turf farms are probably leaning in down those paths as well. And I guess the other point around turf supplies is whether you're getting wash turf, which can increase the cost of your turf supply because of the washing process, or is it soil backed, and what's the composition of the soil behind that, which can sometimes be a cost factor, but also a performance factor as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucas. I will put the call out for any last questions for anybody out there. If you want to drop them in the chat now or raise your hand. In the meantime, I am just going to do a little plug for SPORTENG and your website and the resources. So for anyone that wants to delve into this a little bit more, or any further information, SPORTENG have some great resources on their website that helps you essentially from go to woe in terms of the project planning phase and all the things to consider. So I highly recommend jumping onto the SPORTENG website and having a look. I go back there regularly just to remind myself of the bits and pieces I need to continue to think about for projects. Again, a final call out there for any burning questions that might be out there. No, it's not looking like it. What I will say, a big thank you to the SPORTENG team. Lucas, Andrew, Marty, thank you for your time this morning. Again, I think I say it every time when we do something. And I know, Lucas, you and I have worked together quite a lot over the last couple of years. Every time I do a session with SPORTENG, I learn something new, and I've been around for ages. So it just goes to show that what you guys are providing for our industry is fantastic. So a big thank you for your continued support of PLA. A little plug as well. Again, the SPORTENG team will be at the VicTas Region Conference in May, presenting, particularly in and around pickleball and other facilities of that nature that councils are dealing with. So if that's of interest, get involved in our upcoming conference. Early bird tickets close on the 31st of March, so getting quick for that one. Other than that, we are going to call today's session done. So a big thank you again to the SPORTENG team, and thank you all for coming. You will receive an email with a link to the webinar recording and other materials after this session, likely to be late this week, early next week. So with that, thank you all, and we'll call the session done.
Thanks, Dan.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone.